Psychology was not matured as a science until the middle of the 19th century. Psychophysics, which is the study of how physical events such as lights and sounds affect our senses, answered such questions such as how well we can tell the difference between two books, how soft a touch can we detect on our fingertips on our leg. Many questions about behavior were answered by this theory. Previous psychophysicists were built upon as the time went on. Wilhelm Wundt established the first laboratory explicitly designed for psychology experiments. He also made the first psychology textbook and made two illusions that contributed to psychophysicists. The first was the Wundt illusion, which made it look like two straight lines were actually bent because of lines on slants. And the second was the vertical horizontal line, which actually looked like the horizontal line was longer, but in reality they were both the same length. Edward Titchener, who was a student of Wilhelm Wundt, came up with ideas which eventually became structuralism, which is the analysis of the human mind by breaking it down into the simplest kinds of experience and then asking how these simple experiences come together to produce more complex experiences. And even before Wundt opened his lab, William James assembled equipment for teaching psychological phenomena. He also came up with a textbook called Principles of Psychology, which helped shape the field for the future. There were many studies done with animals, and two people to do these were Ivan Pavlov and Edward Thorndike. Ivan Pavlov demonstrated how repeatedly exposing a dog to the sound of a bell and then giving it some food would eventually cause the dog to salivate in response to the bell. He was a Russian physiologist who described classical conditioning also. The dog learned that that the ringing of the bell often resulted in food, and such learning became known as the classical conditioning. Edward Thorndike studied cats and dogs and learned how to escape from puzzle boxes that he built. These studies and the ones that followed showed the value of controlling exactly what happens to the animal and carefully measuring the time it takes for the animal to learn something. Behavioralists like James B. Watson and B. F. Skinner firmly anchored the functionalism that dominated psychology at that time. John B. Watson published what became known as the Behaviorist Manifesto, and B. F. Skinner was a behaviorist who rejected the study of any mental events and felt that the brain outside the field of psychology. Behaviorists were not concerned with interior mental processes, but rather the outward behaviors, and this became a thing called the black box in behavioralism, which is shown in the figure. Watson's hope was well-founded as behaviorism came to dominate psychology through the 1940s and 50s. The Gestalt psychologists included Max Wertheimer and Wolfgang Kohler. These psychologists insisted that the entire perception we experience is more than just the sum of the parts. Cognitive psychology is the study of internal mental processes, specifically how we acquire and process information and gain knowledge. Modern psychology is a cognitive science that discerns processes in the machine at work. This is the computer model. The cognitive psychology was inspired by the model of computer processing, where information goes in, is processed, and then information comes out. The second one, cognitive psychology, experiments consist of carefully controlling sensory input, asking the participant to process that information in a particular fashion, and observing the person's response. Neuroscience is the study of the nervous system, which includes the brain and spinal cord to all of their connections of the body. Many cognitive psychologists also work with neuroscientists, and Cognitive psychologists often use imaging methods to measure activity in different brain regions, and these people are known as cognitive neuroscientists.